I'm pointing over here, hoping that with my new laptop there's an editing software already installed that will allow me to do photos overlaying a video. We will both find out whether or not that's possible because this is the first video that I'm editing on this laptop. 안녕하세요 여러분, 저는 Mari입니다. 오늘은 I am going to give recommendations for fantasy K-dramas. Fantasy is a massive genre with many subgenres. So for this particular video, I will not be talking about any time slip shows because Korea loves their time slip shows. So it would just be too many to talk about here. I think it would dominate the conversation. And I'm also not going to talk about any zombie monster shows. I won't be talking about those because I often feel like zombie shows provide you with a scientific explanation. Science is not going to be a part of this discussion. If it can be explained with science, it's not fantasy. I want to talk about magic. I am also going to try my very best not to highlight super popular K-dramas, although it won't be possible to exclude them altogether because of course I'm going to also watch the super popular K-dramas and might want to recommend them to you. But just as a warning, shows like The King, Hi Bye Mama, Goblin, Legend of the Blue Sea, Hotel de Luna, those really big shows are not going to be on this list. I'm hoping to provide a few hidden gems for you guys. Lastly, I do want to give some honorable mention. I have about 7 shows here that I just haven't had the pleasure to finish watching, so I don't feel comfortable giving them like a gold star recommendation stamp if I haven't seen the whole thing. So those shows are Tale of Nine-Tailed, Jinxed at First, Doom at Your Service, He is Psychometric, Bolgasal Immortal Souls, The Uncanny Encounter, and lastly, Mystic Pop-Up Bar. Okay, let's get on to the video. Because I have so many shows that I want to talk about today, I think the best way to tackle them is to further break them down by category. And if you know me and my channel, you know how I like my categories. I also think this will be kind of helpful for you if you have something very specific that you're looking for. See the chapter times below. Our first category is high fantasy. High fantasies are set in a fictional world, often incorporating magic or other humanoid species into the socio-political landscape. And the plots often operate on really grand scales. Think Lord of the Rings, The Witcher, The Last Avatar, or Game of Thrones. I truly wish I could just rattle off a bunch of high fantasy K-dramas the way I just did for English-speaking shows, but unfortunately I don't think high fantasy is a genre that Korea has really developed. There are a few, but if you're looking for Asian high fantasy shows, I would recommend anime or C-Drama Land. So this category is a category of one, a very lonely category, and that recommendation is Arthdal Chronicles. Now I can hear you all typing down below, what about Alchemy of Souls? And yes, I do agree that Alchemy of Souls would be in a high fantasy category. Unfortunately, I personally did not enjoy Alchemy of Souls, and I dropped it fairly early on in the series. I've mentioned it in a wrap-up quite recently, so if you want to know more of my thoughts on Alchemy of Souls, you can go find it on my channel. It'll be, you know, a poster in one of the thumbnails. And that actually goes for all of the K-dramas I'm going to discuss today. If I have made a video on it in the past, it will be linked below. And I've talked about most of these in the past, so if you want to know more opinions on any of these, I will be able to help you out. But let's go back to Arthdal Chronicles. I have a first impression that has the synopsis, plot breakdown, all of that good stuff. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I have so many K-dramas to talk about today, but I do want to highlight my opinions on the show as a whole, like as an entire series, because this first impression is only a review for episodes 1 to 3. This show gets really darn good. It's a really darn good high fantasy. You get completely sucked into the world and you want to know more, or at least I did. I really hope that we get season 2. It's also a show that has stuck with me personally, especially the characters. I'm surprised at how often I do think about the characters and the character interactions. There's a lot to ship within the show. There's a lot to think about within the show. I think it's a great first season. Like, it's laying so much wonderful groundwork for potential second seasons that I really do hope we get season 2. I still think about this show. What has it been, like 3 years later? It is loosely based on the Korean creation myth, so I, as you know, like a white girl Canadian, from my perspective, it does seem like an authentic Korean high fantasy. Alright, so the next category. If we have high fantasy, there is also low fantasy. And to put it simply, low fantasy are shows that take place, or stories rather, that take place within our world. And that's a huge umbrella, as you can probably guess, so I'm going to further break it down. The first one I'm going to talk about is magical realism. Stories that fall within magical realism genre often have levitation or telekinesis or, you know, super strength and super speed kind of shows. Often superhero fiction could be categorized as magical realism. And within this category, I have 3 recommendations. The first one being I Can Hear Your Voice. The series follows a boy who can hear the thoughts of everybody else around him. What is that called? Is that called telekinesis? No, telepathy. It's telepathy. And it's also a Nuno romance. If you do go to check I Can Hear Your Voice out, be prepared for something that's super dated. Next is While You Were Sleeping. While You Were Sleeping is a show about 3 individuals who develop the power to see the future in their dreams. I actually don't remember much about the true plot of the show, like what they're trying to stop or anything like that, because one of the standouts for me is the romance and the humor between our female and male lead. It's got Lee Jun-suk in it, and I actually think the dude's hilarious, so there's that. Next we have Strong Woman. I know the title's longer, but I can never remember the full title. And Strong Woman is about this teeny tiny cute little woman who has super strength, and she is hired to be the bodyguard of a CEO because, or rather the secret bodyguard, because who would look at this woman and think she's any sort of threat? And they do end up developing a romance. I don't think this show lasts the test of time. The romance for sure does. This is one of the cutest couples. But there are many aspects of the series that I skipped over through the second watch, and I don't want to get into it here, but I don't think the LGBT representation is very good at all. It's really kind of bad. But yeah, if you want to know more about how I think Strong Woman holds up to today's standards, I do have a review video for it. Next category I am calling transformations. And I defined this category as dramas or stories that depict characters who can transform, whether that is shape-shifting or soul swapping. First one is Meow the Secret Boy. This K-drama tells the really charming story of a cat who can transform into a human man. While I really enjoyed, say, 3/4 of this drama, I found the ending really unsatisfying, and I was happy when it was over. Like, the ending felt a little tiresome for me to get through. I do remember Meow the Secret Boy as something that's very charming, something that's very fairy tale-like. It reminds me of a ballet. I think if you are going to give Meow the Secret Boy a chance, watch it around Christmas time. I think it would pair very nicely with the Nutcracker. Next, I have Secret Garden. I'm pointing over here, hoping that with my new laptop, there's an editing software already installed that will allow me to do photos overlaying a video. We will both find out whether or not that's possible, because this is the first video that I'm editing on this laptop. Where were we? Secret Garden is a show that is wrapped in nostalgia for me. It is one that I have never rewatched because I don't think it would stand the test of time. I'm gonna leave it in a little corner, be very grateful that I watched it, as it was my first K-drama that I ever watched. It sent me down, it sounds cheesy to say, but in completely different life path. I've backpacked South Korea because of this show. I've decided to go back to university and study Asian studies because of this show. I'm learning Korean truly because of this show. So it's just gonna stay over here. I bring this show up in this list for two reasons. The first one is that it is a soul swapping story. It's about a CEO and a female stunt woman who end up swapping bodies on multiple occasions and the romance and shenanigans that happen with that. And two, because I like bringing up my first K-drama as a way to ask you guys, what was your first K-drama? The last K-drama in this transformation category will be Beauty Inside. The series follows a famous actress who transforms into a different person once a month. She cannot control this. It's something that happens to her. And her budding relationship with a CEO who has the, I can't remember what it's called, but he can't recognize faces. I like to recommend this K-drama to those romance viewers who want something more adult and love the trope of kind of like enemies to lovers. Alright, next category, which I am calling the world slip. So I think the title is quite self-explanatory. This category follows stories where characters fall from one world into another one. This one being W. Our female lead in W is a doctor who ends up getting sucked into her father's manhwa, and while she is there, she develops a relationship and a romance with the male lead or hero of the manhwa. This K-drama also has one of my favorite villains, being the faceless villain from the manhwa. He is just so terrifying. If you want to know more about my favorite or at least most memorable K-drama villains, I do have a video on that. The first half of W is thoroughly entertaining. Really enjoy it. Sometimes I rewatch the series and stop about halfway because I know how it's gonna end and I just couldn't care less, frankly, because it employs a trope that I'm really not a fan of, being memory loss, and the show never recovers from it. It's never the same once they implement the memory loss. Every positive I have about W, I have an equally strong negative. So I have a really love-hate relationship with W. So I'm just gonna give W to you. You can watch and formulate your own opinion. Next, I have Extraordinary You, and I'm just realizing that this show is in the wrong category, but I'm not gonna move it now. Extraordinary You follows a cast of characters who slowly discover that they are living within a manhwa and are subject to the author's whims and desires. I think the reason why I put Extraordinary You in this world slip category to begin with is because there is a very strong line between when the characters are puppets within the author's story and who they truly are. It really does feel like them as, like, you know, themselves are getting pulled into the author's world. So it feels like a world slip show. At least that's my excuse for why it is not in high fantasy, because I do think you could make the argument that this is a high fantasy. Moving on. This is the biggest and last category for this video, and that is the supernatural category. This category is filled with ghosts and gods, witches and shamans, and angels and demons. First show I'm going to recommend is Chicago Typewriter. There is so much going on with this drama. It's operating on a lot of different levels. From past life connections to a ghost who is trying to help his reincarnated friends. I warn you that if you are going to give Chicago Typewriter a try, you have to get past the first 6 episodes. At least. The beginning is super clunky, and I would completely understand if you don't have the patience to sit through this. I often don't have the patience to sit through shows with the promise that they'll get better. I don't have that much time to waste. So if you can't slug through the first beginning of Chicago Typewriter, I completely understand. But if you do, I think you'll be really rewarded. The story just gets better and better and better. There's so many layers to it. It's so good. Next, let's talk about Angel's Last Mission Love. Angel's Last Mission Love is about an angel who is sent to Earth on one last mission. This mission is to find this blind prima ballerina, Love, and if he succeeds in this mission, he is granted his wings. There are definitely some hurdles with this mission because the ballerina in question is not the easiest to love, and because this is a K-drama, we know that the angel is the one who is going to start falling in love with this ballerina, and that is not allowed. The standouts for this series, in my opinion, are definitely the actors involved, and also I really enjoy supernatural stories that involve the bureaucracy of the afterlife. Next is Oh My Ghostess. This is another show that is old and wrapped in nostalgia for me. If Secret Garden was like the very first show I ever watched, then like Oh My Ghostess would be within the first 5 probably. It is about a virgin ghost who possesses a very shy girl in the hopes of fulfilling one of her life's regrets, which is not losing her virginity. And the two of them, the two girls, the ghost and the shy living one, end up falling in love with the same man. There's a lot of issues with this show which mark it as a product of its time. I think if you were to rewatch it, you would have a lot of questions about consent, but it was the show that really got me interested in Korean folklore and superstition, and I do remember it fondly. I'd be curious to know if any of you have watched Oh My Ghostess recently and your thoughts on it, because I've only watched it once, and like I said, that was many, many years ago. Okay, next, another show that is not the greatest is Bride of the Water God. Bride of the Water God follows a woman whose bloodline has been sworn to serve the water god whenever he comes to Earth. This show's plot is super messy. Really, really messy, very unfocused. It lacks a lot of satisfying moments. The reason why I recommend it to you is because I do like the representation of the actual gods. The show is at its best when we're in the gods realm or we're watching interactions between some of the secondary god characters. Second to last in this video is going to be The Witch's Diner. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on The Witch's Diner because I feel like I made a review on it quite recently, although knowing my upload schedule, it was probably like 8 to 10 months ago. But this is a very spooky show. I think you'd have a lot of fun watching this miniseries during Halloween. Now, last but not least is The Sound of Magic. This series follows a mysterious magician who is squatting in an abandoned amusement park and his mentorship of a discarded teen. Magic presented here is very ambiguous. It's left up to viewers' interpretation to decide for themselves whether or not they think the magic was real or not. And I do really like this aspect. It's got a very strong message to say, which gives it a fairy tale-like quality. It is a musical though, so do be mentally prepared for that. I personally did not enjoy the vast majority of the musical numbers. There's only 1 or 2, which I think really elevates the story, and I do think it's a must-watch of the year. Okay, you guys, those are all of my fantasy K-drama recommendations. Please leave your favorite fantasy K-drama down below because I love fantasy. Fantasy is a very beloved genre for me personally. I'm always looking for more fantasy. Have a good day, have a good night, bye.